Um, Perfect. All right, and we're gonna do one quick camera check because I am using Ecamm Live to change things around. So this is how I usually do it, but want to make sure if you can see this okay, let me know. Move the chat out of the way too. All right, let's see. This looks pretty good to me. Let me know if you all can read that. Perfect. Perfect. All right. All right, so let's get started here. Welcome Mia, thanks for being here. Okay, so Scott and I, if you came on while Scott and I were chatting, we were talking about baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. And this is Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter was the New York Yankees captain from around 2000 or something like that. Until until he retired in let me
Entonces,
see.
por eso tiene que estar atenta, pues siempre. ¿Cómo está, Vena?
All right. I don't know if I can auto mute.
Yeah, these are installed back in.
Yeah. All right. There should be a setting for that, right? Mute all upon entry. Perfect. Um, yeah, want that. Okay. Anyway, sorry about that. Yeah, great. Um, and then that, perfect. Okay, sorry, a little rusty on the using Zoom for the webinar thing. Okay, cool. So anyway, thank you everybody for coming. Yes, the captain, Derek Jeter, until he retired in 2014, he was the captain. He has expressed very few regrets in his amazing career, and why would he? He's got like 4 World Series rings, MVP, World Series MVP, Rookie of the Year, many Golden Gloves, or Gold Gloves. But one thing he did say he regrets is that he didn't live in the moment as much as he would have liked to. That he was always busy thinking about the next thing. And this is really highlighted by a quote he gave on a podcast a couple of years ago. If I could go back and change anything, what I would do is my last season, I kept a journal. Every day, it was like 1 sentence, 2 sentence. It wasn't even necessarily about something that happened in the game, just how I was feeling at the time. Um, and I wish I would have done that my entire career. So I feel like that really kind of puts an exclamation point on the him wishing he lived in the moment more. And the problem is that he was so focused on the goal and looking to what's next that he didn't build space into his career to enjoy it while it was happening. And when we produce our podcast, when we run our business, we feel the same way. I know I certainly did for a long time, right? I've shared, if you're on my mailing list, I've shared stories of how I had a panic attack in 2020 because I didn't create enough space in my business, and with my kids being home, I wasn't able to focus on anything really. Um, but over the summer, I was able to uh, kind of knock off of work unexpectedly and go to the zoo with my family because I, over those 4 years, built that space into my business. And that's what I want to help you do today with your podcast. But honestly, the things that we're going to be talking about today can apply to a lot of things, not just your podcast. So, um, that's what I'd like you to keep in mind. This is very podcast centric, obviously. But these are systems for life and for our business. So, what's on the agenda? Well, I'm going to do a quick primer on how to think about organization. This is really thinking about the system you want to build, right? I think that often I'm guilty of it too. I will just go in and open up a blank document, a blank Notion database or whatever, and then just start typing without really thinking about it. So we're going to think about that. Then we're going to build a planner in Notion together. Well, you'll watch me build it. Um, I'll do a quick primer on automation. we'll build a simple automation in Zapier. And for I was informed a couple years ago, Zapier is the proper pronunciation. Zapier like happier is what I was told. So um, building a simple automation in Zapier, and then lots of you submitted questions, and I'm sure questions will come up. So if you are going to ask a question, if you could add a question mark to the beginning of what you say so I can kind of quickly scan through at the end. I will probably save most questions for the end here. So that's the agenda. Let's think about organization. So these are the three questions that I like to ask my clients and my students when we sit down to build a system. What do you need to track? What is what's the core information that needs to go into this system we're building? And I like to start with the core information first. You could always build out, but we don't want it to get too big, too complicated, too fast, because that's going to prevent us from actually doing it. So, what do you need to track? I think with a podcast planner, it's going to be episode number, title of the episode, recording date, when it goes live, and maybe the status as it moves throughout the rest of your process. So, we're in pre-planning or research. We need to write the episode. We need to book a guest. We've recorded it, stuff like that. So that's the first question you want to answer. I like to whiteboard this. I have a giant whiteboard behind me. I like to whiteboard this or get out a pen and paper and just kind of write down all of the information that I think I need to know, um, preferably at a glance, right? And this is one of the reasons I like using Notion. It allows you to create lots of interesting views, but it also has that document part built in, so you're not building a ton of dependencies on other tools. And that's really the second question that we need to answer here. What tools do you already use? I suffer from shiny object syndrome, as I'm sure many of us do, where it's you tell yourself, hey, if I just find the perfect tool, everything will be amazing. Well, let me tell you something as someone who, in the last, I'm going to say 18 months, switched task managers from OmniFocus to Todoist to things back to Todoist. The tool's not going to help you, or a new tool is not going to help you. So, what tools do you already use? Because if you're already using them, if you're already living in those places, then you don't need to form a new habit, right? I track, or most of my notes, most of the stuff I do is in I'm pointing to my iPad because that's what Obsidian is up on. But Obsidian is a note taker app that I use. It's really simple and I like it, and I'm always using it. So when you think about building your system, don't immediately go to, okay, what's the tool I need to build the system? Think, what tool am I already using? Kat says for me, that's all ADHD. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. My therapist asked me maybe a couple of months ago. She said we were having a conversation, and she said, has anybody talked to you about ADHD? And I said, probably not in the way that you're about to talk to me about it. So probably have a little bit of that as well. Plus, I love exploring new tools and trying things out. I'm a technologist. And so it's really easy to make that the first step because that's the fun part, right? But if you think about what you're already using, then it'll be an easier lift. It'll be an easier habit overall. So what do you need to track? What tools do you already use? Now, what's the first step, right? I think a lot of us are inclined to think the first step now is, oh, well, if I'm already using Notion, let's go in and actually build something in Notion. But what I like to do is map things out first. Again, I'm a big fan of pen and paper. If you've been following me for a long time, you know I'm a fountain pen nerd. And if you don't, I am a fountain pen nerd. So I love mapping things out. So let's look at a quick example here. this is going to be what we are going to build in. Well, this list is what we're going to take and put in Notion in a minute. Okay, so um, this is some of the stuff I already covered. If I'm thinking about what is the first step, maybe what's the minimum viable product for me building a simple podcast tracker. And again, I really want to stress this, right? Because I think this happens a lot. I shared my desk setup on all of the social media channels and on my blog last week, and I got a lot of this comment. Wow, that's amazing. My desk doesn't look anything like that. I really got to step up. But if you scroll to the bottom of that desk page, you will see what my desk has looked like every quarter or so since May 2019. And you'll see it was a very incremental build. So it's easy to look at what other people have and say, oh, I need that, but it's going to take me forever. Just think about the minimum you need, right? That first desk had just a microphone and some soundproofing panels. And now I have all of this 5 years later. So this is what I've mapped out here. This is what I would need for the kind of minimum viable planner. This is how my planner started out. And this is why I want to build it from scratch first. I want to show you how I build it, but then I also don't want to immediately overwhelm you with all the stuff that's in there now because that was built up over time. So let's walk through this. So first, title or topic, right? Usually this is going to be title for me, title of the episode. And this is text, or in Notion, it's going to be a page. One of the things I like about Notion over Airtable, I know that was one of the questions, is Notion has the document stuff built in. So we don't need a dependency on something like Google Docs to have our show notes. Now, I already had that dependency. Because um I was using Airtable, but if I'm starting from scratch today, I'm probably not going to have that. John asked, I unexpectedly have to bail. I'm sorry to hear that. Yes, I will send the recording out in an email after this. So yeah, this is going to be recorded and sent out. Sorry you have to bail, John. Thanks so much for being here for when you could be here. Um, okay, so that's the title or the topic. This would be text, or in Notion, it would be the page. Type of episode. For me, the type of episode is either going to be a solo episode, an interview, or a bonus episode. Where a bonus episode is something that probably the production value is not as high. It's something I don't release on my normal schedule. It's just something extra I was thinking about. But I've been trying to do more solo episodes. That's a whole other discussion. But I treat each of those a little bit differently until the process changes. And so I want to get a good look of what interviews do I have, what solo episodes do I have. The solo episodes also, they get recorded a little bit closer to the recording date than the interviews do. So I need a good view of what's up on my docket for the next solo episodes. Episode number, which is going to be a number field in Notion. Status, which is going to be a select box. And we'll work through the statuses as I build this, but the ones for me are basically planned or researched, need to write, interview scheduled, recorded, out for edit, ready for publish, and then published. Those are mine. I used to have more. I used to have like needs transcript back from edit, but the way my process works now is once, and if you review your editor's work, then you'd probably want to have a back from edit or needs review status, right? I don't often review my editor's work anymore, but we've been working together for a while. I trust him. And if there are like little snafus, that's probably something my VA is going to catch anyway. So, but again, these statuses are going to be totally up to you. Those are mine. Recording date, I like to have this so that I know kind of the lead time between when I record and when an episode is going to air. I like to stay a month ahead. So I like to have at least 4 episodes. I used to be many months ahead, and what I have found is if I interviewed somebody and their episode wouldn't get published for 6 months, 6 months is a long time and a lot can like I know people who have I've interviewed for their job and they left their job or they got fired or they would freelance and then they took a full-time job. Um, and there were some things that I felt like were just too time stamped. I try not to be time stamped, but also I want to try to keep things as relevant as possible. So I like to be about a month ahead, maybe 2 months ahead. But having the recording date and then the release date allows me to easily see, oh man, I don't have an episode ready for next week, right? Like that's like there's like a red flag there, right? And then sponsors. My podcast is sponsored, and so I like to track that. For me, that is a relation, and so I have a separate sponsors database, and then I relate the sponsors to the episode. It's going to be text here, like we won't build out the whole sponsors database. We'll walk through the actual system later, but I wanted to keep this. I know we have a limited amount of time, and I want to get a number of things done here. So that is what I'm thinking for this. I should probably have it up on another screen because now we're actually going to build it in Notion. So I'm going to go over here and clumsily vamp while I open up Notion where it needs to be, which is right here. Okay. And we'll go on so that everybody can see it better. And then we'll come back. And actually, maybe I'll just do full screen for this. I'll open this and then hide. Okay. So, first of all, let's call this episode planner. All right. If you are, and I should say, if you're unfamiliar with Notion, Notion scared me for a long time. Not scared me, but it was confusing. I don't think Notion really knows what it is. Uh, it's a database, but each database entry is a page. Also, pages can have databases. So it's very strange. Um, but what we're going to go through here is we have a page with our episode planner on it, and we're just going to build a database, which is more or less a spreadsheet, like a super powered Google Sheet. So um, I think when you look at other people's Notion setups, it can get overwhelming. Um, but if we take it kind of one step at a time and we build it from scratch, it does start to make sense. I got into Notion because my friend Kat Mulvihill uses Notion, and we were planning something together, and she built something in Notion, and that was my introduction to it. So, I would recommend using something. If you want to get into Notion, I would recommend using it for one project, and then build from there. So, okay, so we'll call this episode planner. All right. So something I like a lot about Notion is if you press the /, it brings up these basic blocks, right? Which is basically just content. But if I type database, it'll give me a few options. I'm gonna choose database inline. The difference for all intents and purposes here is pretty negligible. Okay. So this has created a table for us. Um, we're going to call this episodes, and we have a table view. So we have name. I'm going to change this name to title, right? And so that's going to be our first view. This is also going to be where the page um is uh is going to live. Um, all right. Also, let me know in the main chat here. I'm getting a couple of DMs. So let me know in the main chat if this looks better, if this looks okay. Now, um, it's pretty big on my screen, so hopefully y'all can see this okay now. Let me know. Um, and it's blurry. Okay. All right, so here's what I'll do. It's big, but it's blurry. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is uh share my screen just through the old fashioned way here in Notion. Or in Zoom. Is that better? Oh, now I can't see the chat because I'm a big dum dum. Okay. Alrighty. Much better. Fantastic. Thank y'all uh for letting me know that. Okay, perfect. Um, so maybe I can dip this down a little bit. How interesting. Um, how did we get the episodes header in there? Okay, great. This is blurry for all of you, so you didn't see what I was doing. Okay, so here's let me, you know what? I'm just gonna start from scratch. So I created a new page here in Notion. I just put it in my private space. Clicked the plus button. I created a new page in here. So that is the first step. Then there was a blank title here called new page. I called this episode planner. Then I used the forward slash. And I know that there's a database function. Like I said, this is going to be inline or full. I'm just going to put this inline for now. And then we see the untitled thing here. This is why I think Notion can be confusing to some people because now we're putting a database on a page. So I'm going to call this episodes. Now it gives us like the default is a text field and then some tags. I'm going to rename this to title. And I'm going to delete the tags. This is called property. I keep saying fields. This is called property. So we have the title. The next thing I'm going to do is add the episode number. And then I like to have the episode number on the other side of the title, because that's how I like to sort the table, or sort the database. All right, then we want type of episode. Oh, and so this is, I always search for new properties, but that's not what I want to do. I want to pick a select. So I'll do the select. We'll call it type of episode. And then we'll add some options. Solo, interview, bonus. This is color coded. The next thing we will add here is status, which is so okay. So there's a status field. So this is the status field. I see oh, can't find where you create a new page. Okay, cool. So this is good. In your sidebar, you'll see some spaces. If you hover over any of those spaces, you'll see a well, you'll everybody has the private space, right? So this is something that you create pages only accessible to you. If you hover over private, you can click add a page, and then that'll create the new page for you. There's also the icon up here, um, for create a new page. All right. So type. Okay. So now I want to make this a select. The status is conceptually different. I like select. I just think it's easier. Status is really nice for a bunch of things, but um, I like using select because there's one I just think it's easier to work through in my mind. So, um, we'll do planning, need to write, needs guest, interview scheduled, recorded, out for edit, ready for scheduling, or ready for publish, we'll say. Scheduled for publish, and then published. All right, so there's all of our statuses, statusi. And so now we'll do, oh, this is, wow, this is probably suggesting stuff based on my Notion database. So air date is definitely one. Um, or air date, live date. We'll also do recording date. So we wanted the date field again. And then we'll call that recording date. And you can reorder by dragging the name of the property and just sliding it over. So you can organize this in the way that makes the most sense to you. So now I'm gonna let me see. I need to double check what I promised we'd oh right. So let's see. Type of episode, episode number, stat. Oh, sponsors is the only thing we're missing. Fantastic. Okay, and then sponsors, which again, I'm gonna make this text. I think it would be more useful as a relation, but you could also make this like a multi-select, right? Maybe that's like another way that you could do it so that the nice thing about making it a multi-select is that you don't have to retype the sponsor every time. So um, let's see, what are some pretty common podcast sponsors? HelloFresh, Mint Mobile, Casper mattresses, if you listen to podcasts in the mid tens. So then you can just kind of have a list of all of your sponsors and easily select them. So this is the planner. If we see this kind of work out in the real world, we can call this episode 1. How to build a podcast planner. This is going to be a solo episode. Status is recorded, we'll say. And then the recording date we'll make today, and the published date we'll make next week. All right. And the nice thing about having all of this here is that you can also create, this is not going to be a full Notion tutorial, but you can, build a bunch of different views, like your calendar view, so you can see when episodes are being published. So this is how I would go about it. I could make this available for y'all. Just if you want a starting point. Actually, in fact, I'll just do that right now and share it in the chat. So if you want a starting place, I'll copy this link and I'll just drop it in the chat right now. And if you're watching the recording, I'll make sure to include this with the recording as well. So just a starting point for you. If we want to see something with real data, whoops. We can go to my Streamline Solopreneur and we can actually see this is going to look a little bit different, but it has the episode number. I have the guest name as well as the title because this show did only have guests. So I have guest name, title, and like I said, I do have a Google Doc, the recording date. And then if I move over the live date, sponsors, here's the status. And I have a bunch of other info too. But again, like this is stuff that I added later. Cat, I tried adding an entry and everything I did so far was lost. What did I do? Oh, I don't know. That's really interesting. Maybe the page refreshed. Very strange. Yeah. But the other thing that I have here, right, is I have a Kanban board or a status board, so I can kind of get a full view of all the episodes, right? I have nothing recorded right now, but I'm also nearing the end of my season, so I don't need a lot recorded right now, and I do have a few interviews scheduled down here. So, and then the other thing, like I said, I have the recording schedule. And I don't know if I guess I don't have the publish schedule. So I just publish every Monday. So I can kind of get a look here of, okay, so I'm recording yesterday, Monday, on the 13th, and on the 19th. Um, so again, that's kind of something I really like about Notion. So now if I switch my camera back here, um, so again, that was like a really quick overview of how to build something in Notion. I wanted to give you a starting point so that we weren't just speaking only in concepts. I wanted to give you something concrete. So hopefully that was helpful as a crash course. We'll talk a little bit more about learning Notion in a little bit. So, okay, let's build it in Notion. Now we'll go back here. All right. So one reason I think it's really important to keep things digital is, I know a lot of people are like, well, I just use pen and paper, and I love pen and paper, like I said, a lot. Um, is when you use a digital planner, whether that's Google Sheets or Notion, or Airtable or whatever you're most comfortable with, um, it could be a place that can be automated. And so the second part of this is now that we have a Notion planner, where we're going to build in some automation to get stuff into our Notion planner automatically. And so I want to do a quick primer um, where we look at the components of automation and then build one, hopefully quickly. Um, so here are the components of automation. The first is a trigger. Some event needs to kick off the entire automation. Something needs to happen um, to kind of start, right? You turn the key in your car to start the engine. The actions, once the automation is triggered, one or more actions are performed, right? So um, if I press, I trigger my car by turning the engine on, and then I put it into drive. Maybe that's an action. I press the gas pedal, it starts going. That's an action. Um, so triggers and actions are the basis for every automation. A condition is you can check for certain aspects or certain pieces of information to trigger actions as well, right? So if we look at our car, um, the car is in park when you start it. And then if you put it into drive, it goes forward. If you put it into reverse, it goes backwards. And if you put it into neutral, you just rev the, like, you can push it, right? Like there's nothing stopping it from going. So those are conditions, right? So you can trigger an automation, check conditions, perform actions based on those conditions. And then the fourth component is timing. So you can run automations immediately or in specific intervals, right? So maybe you want to check to see if someone has signed up for your workshop and get a text message, but you don't want text messages as soon as they happen. So maybe you set it for 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 4 p.m. You'll get a text message of all the people who have registered for an event or a training you're doing. So that's timing. Again, let's make this a concrete example. One of the most common automations I talk about, because I think it could be very impactful as the first step in improving your entire process, is your scheduler sending the information when somebody fills out your scheduling link to Notion. I do this for my podcast interviews, but I also do it for my CRM. When someone fills out a discovery call or schedules a discovery call, they get sent to my CRM, and I make a note to follow up with them after our call. So this is, I think, a very applicable automation for a lot of aspects of your business. But here's what happens. Someone schedules an interview. I'm going to use cal.com. You can also use Calendly, right? Or SavvyCal or Acuity or like any of these. As long as they integrate with Zapier, you can use it. So someone schedules a call or an interview using cal.com. The action, I'm going to add them to the episode planner in Notion. The condition is, oh, is it blurry again? Oh, that's a huge bummer. Okay. Let me see. Is that better? That should be better. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that again. Um, okay, so the condition is only if the calendar is they filled out is my interview calendar. I have about 10 calendars in cal.com. I don't want all of them to go to my episode planner. So I do check to see if they have if it's the calendar I want them to use. And then the timing. I want this to run immediately after an appointment is scheduled. I don't want to wait, right? So the timing is immediate for this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this. So we'll go to Zaps here. I'll bigify this for y'all. Okay, so let's create something from scratch. We'll create a new Zap. And I should mention here, let me see. I should mention here that I am currently on the free plan for Zapier. It might yell at me to upgrade in the middle of this. I use make.com for most of my automations. I think Zapier is a little bit more user friendly. So okay, so this is cool. Something that I'm AI hesitant, we'll say, but Zapier does a pretty good job of using this to build automations. So when someone schedules a call with cal.com, add them to Notion, is what I'll say here. And then hopefully it'll build something out for me. Nifty. Right. Okay. So it's got the trigger booking created. I'm going to add that. And then the action is create database item. I'm going to add that. So app is cal.com. I need to connect my cal.com account. I was going to do this ahead of time, but I figured it would be good for you to see this part as well. So I'm going to click allow. Maybe. Great. Okay, so now it's grabbed my cal.com information. And I can test it. This is another thing I like about Zapier instead of make.com is I can test my triggers. You don't make.com doesn't really do a good job of testing. Okay, so it's grabbed a few. Whoops. So I'll just nope. Okay. So none of them are going to be from the calendar I want them to be. So I'll click find new records, vamp a little bit. Okay. So we can continue with this one. Okay, so now it's going to ask us here to connect our Notion account. So I'm going to select an account. I think it's that one. And then I need to choose a database. Now, something that bothers me about Notion is you need to explicitly give access to databases. So I'm going to go back to Notion, maybe, and then go to what we just created here in episode planner. And then over here in the three dots menu, I'm going to go down to connections and connect to and type Zapier. Oh, whoops. All right, so once you do that, it'll say Zapier will have access to this and all child pages continue. I'm going to click confirm. And then I'll go back to Zapier and databases. Let's refresh results. And then I should be able to find episode planner. It says all results were loaded. There we go. Episodes. Perfect. So now it's once you pick the database, it's going to get all the fields from the database. And then you can fill them out dynamically. So for title, I'm going to grab this is for funsies basically. I'll grab the title here. The status, I'm going to set to interview scheduled. No sponsors, no episode number. I can add that later. Type is going to be interview, and then include time with date fields. Uh, no. Okay, so recording date. I'm going to grab that key. Where are we? Start is what we want. Well, there's a lot of, oh, start time right here. So we'll grab that. And then air date, we're not going to fill out. And then, what's that? Okay. And then if there's any information that I ask from the guest, I'll usually put it in content, but we don't have to do that right now. So I'll click continue. We'll test this. All right. And then I will go back to the episode planner, and you can see it's been added here into a new field. So we've got all of the information as expected here. The last thing I want to do is add a step, and we want to add a filter. So we want to filter conditions. Only continue if the event type title contains, and then my podcast is named Streamline Solopreneur. So that's what it would look like in cal.com. This is whatever you would name your scheduling tool. So only if the text contains Streamline Solopreneur. I'm going to hit this, and then it will tell me it wouldn't continue, and that's perfectly fine. Because that's the condition I wanted, and we were able to test it otherwise. So that's our automation. When a booking is created at cal.com, check to see if it was the right calendar, the right event title, and if it was, send that information to Notion. Then you would want to publish. I see a star here, so I probably need to upgrade. Yeah. So on the free plan, you can't have multi-step. I've included multi-step zap, right? Because I have filter. So you would need to pay for Zapier for this. If you only have one event type, then you would not need to pay for Zapier for this. So that is kind of a quick walkthrough of how to build an automation with Zapier. I know I've covered a lot. I know we went through a lot right here. This is one building block, right? It takes time to learn, but I think the best thing that you could do is really get in there and start messing around, understanding that Zapier has tools to help, and there are lots of templates. But I'll also tell you that like I said, I've made it my mission in life to help podcasters and solopreneurs create space in their lives so that they're not feeling constantly behind, so that they can go to the zoo with their kids or just relax on the couch. And so something that I have built out is Podcast Navigator, which is a full system that I'm going to walk you through so you can kind of see a final product. Producing a podcast doesn't have to feel stressful and overwhelming. Lots of people I talk to say, I can't stay consistent. I'm struggling. I am week to week on my podcast, and it doesn't feel good. But it doesn't have to feel bad, right? These are my kids on Halloween. The thing that set me down this path was somebody asked me, how do you run 3 podcasts with 3 kids? And it was honestly something I hadn't considered, right? Or how I managed to do it. But I think I mentioned earlier that I had a panic attack in 2020. I was stressed and overwhelmed, and I didn't have space to do anything. And my kids were at home, and my wife is a nurse. And something that I was falling behind on was my podcast, and that was making about $40,000 per year at the time. It was a huge part of my income. and I was falling behind. And so I had a panic attack. And as I'm sitting on the floor in my kitchen, my daughter, my oldest, who's the corpse bride right now, was 3 years old at the time, and she came up to me and she said, "It's okay, Daddy. Everything's gonna be okay." And well, didn't expect that. But I made a promise to myself because it wasn't okay. She, I should be taking care of her. And so I made a promise to build the right systems. Um, and now 4 years on, I've been using these day in and day out, and I want to make them available for as many people as possible. So I've put everything that I know, everything I've learned about podcasting over the last 12 years, everything I've learned about building systems and automations over the last 20 years, because I was a programmer first, into Podcast Navigator. So I want to show with Podcast Navigator. Um, First of all, let me make this a little bit smaller so you can kind of get a full picture of it. Um, I'll hide this sidebar, and I will go into um, the Podcast Navigator space here. Oops. So this is Podcast Navigator. There's a video on how to use it. There's an episode planner with all of the information I showed you in the Streamline Solopreneur planner, as well as helpful notes and checklists to make sure that you're doing everything the right way. So this has built-in SOPs for both solo and interview shows. And again, it has everything that I've put into my planner. This is the exact planner that I use. It's got the sponsor database and CRM so that you can put the contact information in, how many spots they've purchased, and then you can associate it with episodes. There's a feedback form, which you can now, I'm going to update. I need to update this because Notion just rolled out forms, but you can gather feedback here. And that's just the beginning of it. So there's also a launch blueprint. If you haven't launched your podcast yet, or you want to launch another one, there's a whole guide on how to launch your podcast the right way. There is the automations library. So I just built out that automation. If you're thinking this is too much, I don't want to start from scratch, you don't have to. This is my automations database you get inside Podcast Navigator, and I'm always adding to it. And then the last thing that you get with all of this is the video library. So the video library is something I've been building for years. It's got over 100 videos in it, everything from how to use specific tools to how to monetize your podcast, a deep dive on how to automate, and then some new courses coming soon. But this is launching your podcast, getting sponsored and making money, staying consistent. And then it has a full resource library. Again, everything that I built for my podcast, I make available in Podcast Navigator. I try to build in public, but then I also try to build for everybody. So it's got the checklist, the database, episode ideas, and a lot more. A video on how to use Zapier, how to use Calendly. I even give you like my contract, my insertion order. Not that I'm a lawyer, but my insertion order for sponsors if you need that. So everything is here inside Podcast Navigator. Oops, don't want that. So if you're thinking like what I just walked through seems hard or seems like a lot, first of all, I would encourage you to start where we just, I've given you a few templates and you could start messing around there. But inside Podcast Navigator, you get access to the 100+ podcasting videos. I'm going to be adding more very soon. You get the Notion template for managing episode sponsors and more. You get the automations template database with new ones added regularly. You get the podcast launch blueprint. You get a self audit. I didn't even walk through that, but there's a question I get all the time. Somebody asked here, how do I grow my podcast? I think a lot of it has to do with positioning and planning. And so there's a self-audit document for you to kind of go through the questions I always ask to improve the positioning for your podcast. And then there's also a community aspect built in. Uh, so that's Podcast Navigator, but you've attended this webinar. You're sitting through the pitch. So I want to offer you a few bonuses. The first bonus is a one-on-one call that you'll get with me to help you get set up with the new system, right? I can give you all of this and you can buy it. And if you never do anything with it, that's wasted money. I don't want you to waste your money. So if you sign up for Podcast Navigator, we'll hop on a call and I will help you add Podcast Navigator to your Notion area. We can set up one of the automations really quick, and it'll get you up and running. I'll also do the podcast audit for you. So you'll get my 12 years experience launching and growing podcasts. I'll audit your podcast. And then you'll also get early/free access to my automations for podcasters course, which is launching in December. All of this is valued at $1,147, right? You'll get this all with the purchase of Podcast Navigator, which is $300 for the first year, and then it renews at $300 per year after that until canceled. So you can sign up today for $300 and you'll get all of this stuff. The 100 plus videos, I should say, the templates, the automation database, the launch blueprint, as well as a one-on-one call with me, podcast audit, and early access to my automations course. All of that would be $1,447. You would get it for $300. But it's only available for the next 48 hours. So you can head over to podcastnav.com right now. I'll put it in the chat and sign up. I'm typing it right now. So you can go there and sign up. And if you sign up in the next 48 hours, you'll automatically get access to that stuff. So that's it. That's the whole shebang. I know that there were a lot of questions that came in ahead of this, so I'm going to work through those. If you have any questions that came up during the presentation, ask them and I'll get them answered. I'll basically stay here until all the questions are answered. So if I go to the page, right now, so Eric asked, right now I use Google Sheets. Want to see how Notion can be more efficient. So the way Notion is more efficient is that it's got multiple different data types built in, and it's a database. So you can create relationships between multiple sheets, we'll say. And it's a lot easier. You can create better views. And during the presentation, I saw that there's a calendar view, there's a Kanban view. You can create filtered views. There's a view that only my VA has. It only shows her the information that she needs, and she has direct access to that. And I think you can also automate you can also automate with Google Sheets, but I feel the automations are better with Notion because you have more control over the type of data. And then finally, Notion does have the built-in pages, so you don't have a dependency on Google Docs, for example. Okay. Gabriel asked how to get more downloads. That's not really something I'm talking about here. I have other resources. Actually, there's a resource in Podcast Navigator on that. But the shortest answer I can give is podcast swaps or podcast guesting. Go on other podcasts that are like your podcast and make the call to action, listen to your podcast. There's a whole framework I have for this, but that's the best one. Kat, I don't currently pay for Zapier. I'm reluctant to do so as I don't make money. Is this doable on the free plan? We kind of answered that, right? If you're not creating multi-step zaps, it is doable on the free plan. I would say this. Zapier, I think, starts at $20 a month. It's not just for podcasting. The amount of time that Zapier can save you is well worth the $20 per month, I would say. Um, I use make.com for most of my stuff. Like I said, I don't think it's as user friendly as Zapier, which is why I showed Zapier. But that starts at $10 a month. So if you're interested in automating, but Zapier, you're priced out of Zapier. Um, I would recommend looking at make.com. John asked, how can I use these platforms to set up registration for a Riverside.fm recording session? That's a really good question. I would say, um, I actually don't know if Riverside has Zapier integration, um, or automations. But what I do, and you know what, I'm gonna share my screen here again. Little bonus um demonstration. So what I do in Riverside is uh if you set up a studio, the studio name, we'll call it test. Very clever. I'll create that. And then once you create it, you can go to settings. And when you click, I think it's when you invite participants, you're given a link to share, right? And that link has like this little thing on the end of it. So I copy that link, I enable lobby waiting room, and then I put that as the location in my scheduler. So that link will automatically get shared when someone schedules with you. That's the way I do it. I like the way Riverside organizes their recordings. Um, I don't worry about overusing one studio because it makes each call its own thing anyway. But that's how I end up doing it inside of uh cal.com using the Riverside share link. Um, so let's see. Oh my gosh, this is really small. I can't read it. Hold on. I just saw a question come in. Let's see. Curious what view you found to be the best for a complicated podcast with multiple deadlines. For example, if you have track deadlines for reporting, interviewing, recording, interviewing, editing, tracking, mixing, quality control. Um, yeah, wow, that's this is a great question. Mia, I'm sorry if I read this out loud. I just realized you sent it as a direct message. Um, so yeah, I think what I would do there is have the big unwieldy database, and then create views because you can create. Let me go back here. We'll go back to. I'll share my screen. I recognize I'm not sharing my screen right now. Okay, so if I go back here, um, so we have a combination here of status and then types of dates, right? So I would probably have. I'd want to think through this more, but if we have a bunch of dates and then status, I'd probably create a new table or calendar or timeline view, um, and then build a filter that shows um, if the status is interview scheduled. Um, so that's the filter I would create, and then with the three dots next to the word new, you can decide what properties you want to show or hide. And so I would aggressively hide all of this information, right? So, again, if we're looking at this practically inside of my Streamline Solopreneur, I've got the recording schedule. I also have something called image creation, which is only the guest name, the title, and then the photo. right? So this is for my VA. She doesn't need to know the sponsors, the recording date, or the live date. She just needs to know if this is checked and if the photo is here, then she can create the image. Um, I think the same thing goes for current year. Um, the episodes that I guess are set to go live this year. Um, that way I'm not looking at 7 or 8 years worth of episodes all at once. So, a really great thing about Notion is you can create a bunch of different views to make it a little more manageable if you have a lot of information there. That the timeline view would probably be really good because you can kind of color code things and build out something really nifty so you can kind of see a concurrent view of everything. But then having these individual views would help you get a handle on what's in the hopper at each stage. So I hope that's helpful. I'd really want to think through that a little bit more, but that's my initial thought. Um, okay, so I have a client. Let's see. Jason said I have a client creating his own podcast network. Yeah, I think that's very similar to the question that Mia just asked. So, yeah, I mean, what I'd probably do because you can create relationships in Notion, is build a database for each show, and then you could have the master production schedule database, which is a bunch of relationships with the dates and the statuses of everything. Um, you know, and then you could give access to each show's database to the hosts, or if there's an editing team. But that's how I would do it, right? You can create these impressive dashboards inside of Notion to aggregate data from a bunch of different databases. Um, okay. EB, how to use Notion or Zapier? EB, I think I saw EB left. But um, I hope that was helpful. Uh, I know it was quick for both. It was just like a quick run through for both. Um, but I did want to kind of demonstrate like a one-off case in this webinar. Scott, looking into automating repeatable tasks with Notion. I hope that was helpful. If you are still here and you have a specific use case, let me know. Emily says, I'd love an example timeline of what a recording day week would look like. What's the time commitment I can expect? That's a really great question, Emily. I think it depends on the type of show you have, the length of the episodes. I'm a big advocate of solo podcast episodes right now because it's a lot faster. And I think interviews are a dime a dozen, right? And I have an interview show. Um, but because if you have an interview show, now you are de facto reliant on someone else's schedule. And so I only record interviews on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, right? But if I have a guest I really want and that doesn't work for them, now I need to open up my schedule a little bit more. So, or it means I'm only recording at max 2 or 3 episodes with a guest per week, right? So, that really depends on your cadence and how much effort you're putting into it. I will tell you, I save about 12 hours per week because of my process, my automations, and the fact that I delegate most things. Um, Means that I'm only really recording and doing some of the post production and pre production stuff. Um, and I know that that could be tough, like a tough lift, right? Paying for an editor if your show's not making money. But if you do have your own business, um, that was a really easy move for me because the 2 hours I would spend editing an episode, I can now go out and find a sponsor or do client work or something like that. So I know I didn't, there was big, it depends energy there, but it depends. Nicole, how to do it. I hope that was helpful. Catherine, total newbie, need lots of help. I hope that was helpful. How to get these tools to work together from Karen. I hope that was helpful. What are some, Christella? I hope I said that right. What are some entry level automations to make Zapier less scary? Okay. My favorite one. Which did I build this in Zapier? Can I show this to you? I think I built it in make.com. One of my favorites, one of the reasons I use Todoist is in my CRM, right? I have a follow-up field. Um, but I don't check Notion for my to-do list. So when the follow-up feature or when the follow-up field gets updated, I have an automation that sends a task to Todoist for the follow-up date. Um, which means that I will see that in my task manager and in Obsidian, which integrates with my task manager. And I don't have to check Notion for that. So like sending tasks to your task manager, probably a really good entry level automation. Um, Jim, what are some of the best ways to automate the production of my show? Really great question. I use Dropbox pretty heavily. Dropbox has triggers in both Zapier and Make. And so one example is when a new folder with a number gets added to Dropbox, email my editor and let him know there's a new episode. Um, that's the kind of stuff that I like doing. If you're talking about like during recording, one thing if you have video, um, is uh is I use Ecamm Live. Mia, thanks for being here. Glad you can join. Um, Scott, glad you liked it. I think I have one more question here, and then we can boogie. Um, yeah, okay. Yeah, that question I had answered. Integration with other systems, comparisons to Airtable and Monday. I didn't like Monday. I thought it was too unwieldy. And I covered kind of comparing Airtable. I like with Notion, like I have Notion for my CRM as well because I can build something my brain that works with my brain. Whereas if I try to use HubSpot or Salesforce or something, I'm forced into someone else's system. So I'm a pretty opinionated like that. So, okay, that's all the questions. Thank you so much to everyone being here. Remember, if you purchase Podcast Navigator in the next 48 hours, you get all of those bonuses. You get a call with me, access to my automations course, which will go deep on Zapier, and I'll audit your podcast for you. Dave, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Scott, Mia, I know Mia left, and everybody who's here, thank you so much. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Until next time, I'll see you later.